Hello, everybody. It's a good Tuesday afternoon. Good to be talking to you guys.
Welcome to a discussion about a great album.
An amazing album, a one of a kind album, a new album. Gonna be talking
um,
about "Fatigue" by Lorraine. New R&B album came out pretty late this year. Would you like to start off probably just giving like what you could probably give as a synopsis of what you feel like the album's about?
I when I listen to it, I feel like overall it's this fever dream. Like the album's experience doesn't last for that long, but the ambiance of it and all of the different ideas that come together is makes it feel like it's almost like you're staring at some type of 80s film. There's a woman dancing her heart out to whatever feelings are going on in the background. And the music and the production is supposed to give you the context for whatever's going on.
Yeah, that's probably the most like on point, like especially that just imagery of like the sort of vintage '80s woman dancing, just expressing herself in like just throughout all these different avenues, different ways. That definitely speaks to how like sonically the album is definitely a portrait that like it's definitely like a collage. It's a collage of different ideas, different sounds, kind of different genre things, all like bass sort of abstract R&B bedding to it and
Yeah.
work out to it. But you have like different songs that like sometimes like this like what's that one song like the heavy dance beat comes in about halfway through and it's
Uh,
like it's like
I,
nothing else on the album.
I know Two Face is a little bit more fast paced. And then if you're listening to, uh, I can't get to the name in my head, the name of the actual song for it. I'll just try
Right.
to find it in the meantime. But I
But
think,
yeah, I'm terrible with song names as well. And I
yeah,
think because being terrible with song names, especially for this album, I think that speaks to how the album is definitely, as a sound experience, I wouldn't suggest listening to this album for singles. It's not really like that. It's especially like from the many different interludes that are like 40 seconds to 20 seconds long. They're like
the interludes make up an entire song by themselves if you were to play them out. Um,
right.
and I- it is when you play it, it's an experience where you don't realize where the transitions in the songs are.
Yeah, like from the very first song, there's already so many glitchy different effects and transitions, things like that, that this album is made to be listened to as one cohesive beginning to end experience. Because while there are distinct tracks like Blame Me and Find It, Take Two, things like that, Kill Self, while there are these distinct songs that like do have their own solid melody on their own, when you listen to the album as a cohesive thing from beginning to end, they're far better within the context of the entire album. Because I wouldn't say you could listen to one or only two tracks off this album and get a picture of okay, that's who Lorraine is as an artist.
I think, well, I wouldn't say that 100% because when the song, when the album starts, you get Fly Die. Fly Die m- made me interested in listening to the rest of the album just because of it's it's a mix of stimulus for your brain. It's
Right.
like this whole project lays its foundation, its bedrock in distortion.
Right.
So it just it's this weird intro into the mind of whoever wrote the score for this music and sat in the studio and had to, you know, go and go through and edit this and think about the process of what they're putting somebody through. When you listen to it, it is not easy on the brain or the ears,
Right.
but it's
The first
interesting.
the first time you listen through, like the first time I listened to it, the first two times, three times I listened through it, there was definitely many parts, especially like if I wasn't sitting there like focused on this is the track list, what's happening at every given moment. It was hard to kind of keep up with the ideas, which there are sections where doesn't entirely play to the album's strengths, but it does create a larger picture. And I which like it makes sense that that first track, Fly Die, it it hits you with a little bit of all the different ideas, all the different glitches, all the different kind of effects you're gonna get expanded upon in later tracks.
Yeah. It's a glimpse into all of the things that happen, the chaos in the back of the mind of the creator. So when somebody creates art, there's something that you look for. There's a staple that you look for, and every artist in their music, to some extent, manifest what influences them, and you can tell what influences this artist a lot. There's a lot of samples. Oh my gosh!
Yeah. So many
So
samples. I think but like on top of that, in terms of like what influences the artist, in terms of like narrative of the album, because
yeah,
especially to get a better idea of this album, I watched a lot of the music videos, things like that, just to, like really get a fuller grasp of what the artist wanted this album to be about. And it's interesting. It's like this balance. The whole album thematically is this balance of like fighting one's demons and like fighting their demons, fighting the almost like systematic pressures they put upon themselves. Like the visual on Blame Me with the clown, and the way like as she's just putting on the makeup, you just see her like eating it. And it's almost like this metaphor of like not only is she putting on like this clown makeup, putting on this mask to go like be performative and shit like that, but also like the fact that like she's eating this stuff, almost like consuming it into herself, and it's like internalizing these sort of like being fake, being not being yourself, having to like be a clown, having to put on makeup, stuff like that, and
it
like
is in a sense you act out what you believe, and especially in your self-esteem, what you believe that you are. That plays a lot into your what you project to other people and your self-image,
right,
confidence. So using that as a parallel to something that you consume, it becomes in both an insecurity and a strength in like what is my strength in? My strength is in painting this picture of my face, and now it creates a couple more doors. I had more questions with that music video than I got answers for, because I was asking myself like, are you saying that you're a clown? Is that why we're getting all these samples? Is that why there's a comical element to some of these songs and some of it's a little bit airy? Are you saying that you feel like you've become a clown in a sense that isn't funny, but in a way that you kind of devalue your own talent? But obviously, we see how much talent you put into making a project this wonderful
right.
and like compiling all these sounds. But like as an artist, where um, when you're looking into the multiple doors and windows that somebody creates, it's like symbolism like that. I don't know, where do you anchor yourself? I guess this is more of a question. Like, how does like what am I supposed to derive from that? Is more what I
I
was
mean,
asking.
okay, and I feel like the clown mask was just sort of like one of the metaphors for displaying what she as a person is feeling sometimes through having to like cuz especially in being an artist, you're in like this balancing act between making what you love, making what you want to make, and making what you believe people want to hear. So like whether a song is an artist being fully true to themselves emotionally and like this is what I want to do, whether an artist is being true to themselves as her or they're being like full on like just fronting fake and it's all like a performative act, like a Drake or a Little Dicky, either way, it's still a performance, even if that performance is still very close to home, or if it's just to get views and money. It's still a performance at the end of the day. And feel like being trapped inside that limbo is something that's like can be very like mentally difficult to deal with. As just like one as an artist and just two like as a person in general, because like there is always that sense of having to put on a mask in the real world in order to just go about, or being expected to put on a mask and act in a certain way as compared to how you really feel about the world and things like that, and how you really want to express yourself.
It's a it's a greater conversation that's created by um, trying to portray that in your music as well
Yeah,
as in the imagery of the music video.
yeah.
But do you feel like that all of that nuance gets across on the surface? If we're talking
Um,
about like for what the music is trying to do you
I
feel like all of the messages that are embedded in some of these lyrics and some of the like actual symbolism behind the samples, do you feel like all of that kind of pushes
yeah,
the narrative along to the forefront?
I feel like it does. Yeah, because like even like from the first song, you have sort of like what sounds sort of like this flamboyant dude giving this speech about like being real. What have you done to change? Things like that. Being like willing to cut off fake people. Like I can't be wasting my fucking time, like it says on the track. I feel like opening with that, it's very interesting because while it is while it is like a very like flamboyant kind of cartoony voice type of thing, like honestly when I was listening to it, it sounds like a sample of like someone ranting on their IG live. Which
Yeah,
is a bit comical in that sense, but like it also sounds like the person, they're being very real, very blunt about being themselves and being about change, about improving, challenging other people to change, things like that. And I feel like the album it displays this sort of like the clown imagery, insecurities, and sort of depression, things that we all go through. And I feel on top of that, I feel like this whole conversation we had about what the clown mask, like clown makeup represents, and the eating it and all that kind of stuff, being able to like having imagery that gets people to have that level of conversation, that's immediately like sparks these kind of questions just from what they're presented on through the music and whatnot. That's the sign of a really great artist. But even then, on top of that, there's also many themes of like family. Like one of the music videos is literally like 6 minutes of just historical family videos of like weddings, family get-togethers, people who are close to her, things like that.
yeah.
And like on multiple tracks, there's definitely a theme of like family being a place where that security exists. And
Maybe.
and even it,
Oh, let
yeah,
me finish the
my
thought.
bad. But like even in some of the production, like the songs that are definitely about family have the mixing on them is lighter. The instrumentation's a bit lighter and softer.
Yeah. Um, there's this when when you study the historical context of the performer in the early stages of music, it was used for a and very ritual and kind of like sanctioned. It was like organized in a way. And you got madrigals, which are bar chants, and people were singing for recreation, and it was something that was actually renowned and got swept across the world, and that eventually got like transformed into the love ballads that we know now as R&B,
Yeah.
the Chris Browns of the middle age, or or making their names and whatnot. And you fast forward from the medieval jester to the modern day artist. The
Yeah.
jesters worked in courts but they were less than slaves. They didn't make any money. They're only like the only value that they had were in their ability to perform. They performed in
Yeah.
town squares. They were revered because, well, I guess a lot of people disliked them because they were peasants, but like people needed them because they knew a lot of information because they were performing in a lot of different places with important people.
Yeah.
They were able to, through their music, through the performances, kind of convey information to the masses. And I think that's what she's attempting to do in a way. Because if you skip to modern day, the artist is kind of like the jester. But we're in a democracy, so the monarchy is the pop culture.
Yeah.
So it can feel, when you're in the industry, it can feel kind of crazy. You're a jester, especially when you
Yeah.
sign a contract. If you're not an independent artist, even sometimes when
Yeah.
you are an independent artist, you're trying to come up. You
Yeah.
you got to make music
Because
that people will like. But
yeah, and at the end of the day, in the sense of being the jester, no matter how much amazing music you put out there, it's beloved and whatnot, and you are given money for it. At the end of the day, what you're providing has value in the abstract.
mm,
Music can, I guess, the way you create value. Well, I guess the value you make in music would be the money you make off of it and what you do with that.
yeah,
But in terms of the product in and of itself, it is it is recorded sound that makes people feel a certain way when they hear it.
that's cool.
And in a sense, you can say, well, that is a service to people. But I mean, in the abstract, is that is not a service to people in the same way making food for somebody, because people need to eat to survive, building a house,
Um,
making a product, things like that. Music exists in the abstract.
you could argue that music, in a sense, has a cognitive value, like a psychological value, and it keeps you functional for the modern day person. Because people function in soundtracks. This album is going to be a soundtrack for somebody's day.
Right, yeah.
So the average person who has kind of a routine, a mundane 9 to 5, I'm going to work. I get up in the morning,
Yeah.
I'm driving to work, I'm listening to Lorraine. I'm listening to El Apostrophe Ryan. And and I'm gonna toss on Two Face and sing my heart out, or just kind of awkwardly moan to whatever instrumental is in the background until I get to work, so I can think about how much I hate my boss. Like it's just like things like that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. The value of music and the value of art does exist, but from an artist perspective, it can be a bit of an existential crisis to at any moment kind of remember, kind of like, hey, somebody listening to my music doesn't. Do you see what I mean? Like, it doesn't directly. Like, okay, if a homeless person hears my music, that isn't the equivalent of me providing a service to them.
Yeah.
And in that sense, like, sort of the existential dread of like wanting to have an impact on the world, but also knowing the avenue of which you're doing it is based on the idea that what you're putting out is good enough and makes people feel good enough and listen to what you're saying enough to then impact their action.
Yeah. Change change has to be done either relentlessly or so forcefully that people can't ignore it. And we see that in modern day culture now. So yeah, I feel personally, if I had, out of a scale of 1 to 10, I think this album comes in at an 8 for me, because I think there's gems hidden in here for people who can listen to it, even as an everyday album, everyday project to slap in a playlist and still find little things to pick out of it. because it's a personal experience, but it's also very it's tuned for everybody else to comprehend.
Definitely. It's definitely the portrait of her, but the way she paints it, that portrait is so relatable, and like it's so relatable, it's so grounded, it's so transparent that it's very easy to like take a lot from it for your own life and just sort of through an empathy, like not like, oh, you'll feel like sympathy for her because, oh, look at all, like she's crying about all the terrible things, not that, but like sort of like in the way that like sharing life stories with another person
Yeah.
can help you recontextualize and think about your own life, and it's just generally a helpful thing. It makes you feel good about yourself, it makes you feel good about other people, things like that. I think definitely this album, it's definitely an 8 for me as well.
I think over time, I don't think the score will go up over time. If anything, just because of some of my gripes on the
Yeah.
album, it'll become something that'll be harder to play regularly. I think it's a wonderful project that can be put into specific
Yeah.
playlists because it does invoke a certain mood.
Yeah.
Um, but it just, I think 8 is
Yeah.
solid.
I do think there are some
I think that's like
yeah, I do
above
think there are some
average.
technical flaws. Certain songs, the mixes, some of the mix on certain songs just comes off a bit like too loud, too distorted to the point where like sort of the more subtler melody gets lost in like just how loud it all is. Yeah, very
John,
very it's like a cherry bomb
like
type of
cherry
effect.
bomb.
And on
It's like, oh
that and
shit, I lost the melody. Damn.
there's just by the sheer fact of it does flow very well as a 12-track short trim album. There is it just results in the fact that there are just certain ideas that I wish were built out longer, a bit more, that I wanted to hear more out of, and then other sounds, other ideas that like it definitely caught a vibe, but like it's like a few of the songs go for like a full like 6 minutes plus, and there's not like there's definitely some variation, but there's not enough variation to kind of keep you engaged that
Yeah,
whole time. Like on my first listen, some of these songs that were this long, I was expecting them to be that long because I was expecting some glitchier effects, some kind of detours, things like that, and it just sort of like lulled in this same sort of melody for a long period of time.
I would say it kept on. It kept on with the same like. So there's texturally there was some songs that were polyphonic. I would say most of them were had multiple different melodies going on, like multiple different main lines, main themes going on at the same time. But a lot of songs did slip into parts where the transitions were so subtle, unless you were trying to listen for it, you couldn't really understand that there's this bass line and then there's sample on top of it, and there's bass line and then there's sample. Sometimes there's multiple different samples, but there's always this main melody or this main theme, and it's dreamy and it's wishy, and that's what I was saying. Like I just felt this very forced nasally like indie type voice
Right.
where on some of the vocals she would come in and try to almost like save the melody. It's like she had to sing on it in order to for you to be able to catch the melody. And then when the vocals went back out and the samples came back in and then like the production rose, all the synthesizers came into all the distortion, you were like, what's going on? It's you remember walking into to band in the band room and everybody's warming up. You're like, oh shit! Like it's so many different.
Right. Like and sometimes that plays to the album's strengths, and sometimes like the beta room, it does kind of have that just sort of like multiple sounds just clashing against each other
Yeah,
for no discernible reason. But yeah, that's Fatigue by Lorraine. Amazing
I
album.
I'm excited to see
Please
what's to
check it
come
out.
from Lorraine, and I think that that this is going to be an artist that is going to stick around
It
for a while. It's going to be kind of a snowball trying to get her fan base up.
right. If
But
I would say, if you're a fan of like, oh, okay. First and foremost, anyone who's a Frank Ocean fan is already hip to this album, probably. If not, what are you doing? But, but like, if you're into people like Blood Orange, um,
Mossy,
yeah, I would say, why am I blanking on his name? Rex Orange County,
yeah,
Steve Lacy.
uh,
If you're into Steve Lacy, I'll say, Blood Orange's album Negro Swan, I would say is a very good compliment to this album. If there's anything, I would say if you like this album, definitely check that out. Negro
also
Swan, Blood Orange.
at certain points, I would say, especially during the interludes, um, I felt there were samples that were reminiscent of Captain Murphy,
That
and
is true. That is true.
I felt the urge to go listen to some Captain Murphy, but it
I
just
actually have been
I think
listening to Duality quite a bit recently.
so. I think that those are some great artists, some great names to delve into. So, all in all, I'm happy. I was pleased with the experience.
Oh yeah, this is definitely going to be on my rotation going into this next year. But all right, glad you could join us for J Talk this evening.
Remember to like, subscribe, and support us on our social media. That will be coming out pretty soon. We're still trying to work out what we'll
Like,
be
comment,
doing
and
for that.
subscribe.
Let us know your score out of 10 in the comments section. And make sure to turn on the notifications for more content.
Right, and also remember, wash your ass, stay safe out here, wear these masks. Don't trust none of these motherfuckers. Except people you like, because that's just kind of the COVID rule. If I like you, then I trust you not to have COVID and to wash your hands. It's kind of like the unspoken rule. But but yeah, stay meditating, stay chilling, and we are out.